Good morning and welcome to A Closer Look. I'm your host, Linda Fontaine. Today, my guest is Dani Cook, a citizen advocate. Talk to me. I know you've got a topic that's hot right now, that's on a lot of people's minds. Let's hear it.
So, ballot health and the COPA and the proposed changes to the service region are a pretty hot topic, especially after last week's fire and an explosion at BAE. And my involvement, just truly personal at first, is because my grandbaby was born at the Holston Valley NICU, and that's how I kind of got roped into all of this. And we're going on about 7 or 8 weeks now of kind of researching and looking at the information when it comes to the cooperative agreement. What does that really mean? What are the commitments? You hear Ballard talk about we have commitments to the COPA. What are those? What do those mean? How did we get here? I think that's really important. That's a really important piece. And then what can we do about it? Because I think a lot of people, even the politicians that I've talked to in this area and that constituents have emailed and contacted, have said, oh, well, they have a COPA, there's nothing we can do. And that's not accurate. Okay,
first of all, explain to those who may not know what a COPA is.
Okay, so the Hospital Cooperative Act actually came about in 1993. And the way that it was originally intended was for struggling hospitals in rural communities who were not as profitable and having a hard time keeping the door open to be able to work together. And so the original idea behind it was to, it provided that they could enter into a cooperative agreement for the sharing or referral of personnel, patients, and assets. In other words, Wellmont and Misha could have, if they wanted to, with the existing legislation, work together. You hear Alan all the time talking about unnecessary competition. Okay, well, you and Bart were in charge of that. So why was there unnecessary competition? Because there was legislation already in place that would have allowed them to work together if they wanted to cut costs and to improve health care and still make the hospitals profitable for the people. So in 2015, that wasn't quite enough for what they wanted to do with Misha and with Wellmont. So there was a group of legislators. In the House side, it was Eldridge, Harrison, Lundberg, Holsey, Holsclaw, and Hawk. And they introduced it on the House side. And then it was Ron Ramsey, Mark Norris, and Rusty Crowe who sponsored it in the Senate. And that bill is what literally got us where we are and changed things entirely, because it allowed not just for them to share assets and for them to share referrals and patients, it actually allows them to merge. And then this is the line that makes it scary. It says, it is the policy of this state in certain instances to displace competition among hospitals with regulation. And it goes on to say to provide state action immunity from federal and state antitrust law. And that's where we get into this medical monopoly and this freedom to do a lot of things and not have some recourse. And to be quite frank, our politicians got us here. So.
Okay, so tell me, what is the biggest concern? You talked about all this that happened and it doesn't seem up front. So what is the biggest concern? Losing the NICU in our area? There's a lot of concerns with the jobs and the economy and such, but the NICU is near and dear to your heart.
It is. It is.
So what would happen if we lost the NICU in this area?
You know, Alan says that I'm being dramatic when I say this, although he never calls me by name. The fact is, more babies will die. And in this region, you have to look at it in its totality. When I went to these different boards, I pulled every county's data. So for example, Hawkins County has an infant mortality rate of 11.2. That means 11.2 babies out of every 1,000 live births die in Hawkins County. If they have to travel an extra 30, 45 minutes to Johnson City, what do you think is going to happen to that number? Inevitably. What do you do when transport's not available? What do you want to do when it's rainy and foggy and you can't fly anybody? What do you do if you can fly somebody and people who already have a 30% poverty rate now have a $25,000 flight bill? How does that work, and how is it for, the idea of the COPA is for public advantage. How is an advantage to reduce access to health care, increase cost to health care, have it so that families can't participate in the healing and well-being of their babies? How is that helpful to anyone? And what people have to understand is this COPA is a living, breathing document. It says, the legislation actually says, that it can be modified at any time if the department, and that's the health department, determines that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages of this merger. So that's what I don't like about the politicians acting like their hands are tied. And what I really want to know is how do we actually get here? Because the legislators passed SB 994 that amended COPA law. But when they did that, Commissioner Dreisner actually put out an emergency rule filing form. And here's what he said. Because they changed this law and allowed so many provisions and gave the state and ballot protection, he said they weren't going to have time because the filing for the COPA was imminent. And he said, we're not going to have time to put together rules and regulations and how this thing should go because they'd never done a COPA before. So he put together this emergency ruling, and this is what he says. The commissioner believes that it is not possible to promulgate either rulemaking hearing rules or public rules in time to provide the necessary guidance to sufficiently review the proposed merger of the two hospital entities and their application for public certification of public advantage, which is imminent. This inability to conduct a sufficient review presents an immediate danger to the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens located in the geographic service area. So my one question would be, if you knew then it was an immediate danger to the public health, safety, and welfare, why did you give them a COPA? Just because the legislation passed didn't mean you had to give it to them. What happened? Because the FTC said don't do it. They testified in person 3 times and said, whatever you do, do not grant this COPA. And they did it anyway.
So what is the immediate need? What is the hurry? Now I know Ballot's not with us here today and we can have them on another day, but what is, from what you understand, the immediacy of this?
The immediacy is saving money. Like that's the immediacy. Ballot Health is in a unique situation. When these two corporations came together, there was a lot of debt. People think that Wellmont was more in debt. It's actually not true. Wellmont's debt was about 400 million. Mish's was 800.
Wow.
It was double. So they had $1.3 million worth of debt, and they have $308 million worth of COPA commitments. So that's a lot of money, and they've got to figure out where it's coming from. And if you look at the SEC filing that they did in May of 2018, so they went and they got a $950 million bond from the Board of Health and Education Facilities in Greenville, right? Several guys are on this board. And they gave them this bond, and a lot of the folks, like they're CEOs of banks and so forth, but they did an SEC filing to explain how they were going to pay back these bonds. And in that, they literally say it's going to come from merger synergies, which just means, oh, we're going to cut costs, we're going to get rid of, we're going to eliminate services, which is what the COPA said, please don't do that. Let's figure out how to save costs. We know that some things have to go away. And this is one of the things that I think, I've been called an idealist. And I've been told I have to face reality that it's business, and my whole thing is that I believe we can save hospitals without it coming at the expense of the health and well-being of our population. We just have to be creative about the way we do it, and we have to be smart about the way that we do it. And so, for example, with these changes, we're going to rely heavily on transport, right? If these changes actually happen, transport's going to be critical. And we can talk about what transport means for newborns in a minute and for babies. But if that's the case, Ballot Health, why have you not talked to EMS until the last 2 months? You've been knowing this was in your plans for a year. Where's the structure? Where's the support for our EMS folks? Where's the, hey, how does this work? And what do the guidelines say? And how do we make this work? And all of that. So the immediacy is, holy crap, we've got to figure out where to get this money from. Because they admit in the SEC filing that they don't have it. That the money is going to come from the savings through the reduction of services and repurposing.
Now you've had to teach yourself a lot of stuff in a short amount of time. So this all came about around in November, and
Yes.
I'd read somewhere that you were going to be having a meeting in December, the middle of December, to get more information, discuss the situation. How did that go?
It did not.
Okay, because I hadn't heard anything more about it.
No, it did not go.
Right.
About a week prior to that, Tony Keck and I were direct messaging on Twitter. And he hinted at the time that they were going to cancel the meeting. He said, well, the way that you feel and the things that you've said, I just don't know that there's a reason for a guy like me to meet. And I didn't even respond back to him about that. I just let it go because I thought, I'm not taking the bait. I am not taking the bait. And so December 6th, I got an email that just said, because of my lack of trust in Ballot Health, which that would be an accurate statement, that they didn't feel that there was any reason to meet. It wouldn't be productive. And I thought, well, it would be very productive. I don't have to trust you to meet with you. I don't have to trust you to get information. Show me your facts. I don't have to trust you. I can trust the facts. So share it with me. I've asked, I was willing to sign an NDA and said, share with me your plans. What are the details? I will sign an NDA. I just need for it to make sense, because from what I see, it doesn't make sense. And if it makes sense to me, I'm happy to support it, but from what I see, it doesn't. And Tony said, no, we will not be sending you that.
Do you know if there's any other people in this area that have been trying to get more information or question these changes? Because you seem to be on this crusade by yourself, are you?
No, I'm definitely not by myself. A lot of I get additional information, I get support, I get direction from folks. This is the other caveat to this. Ballot Health is the largest employer in this region. When it comes, I mean, period, right? So not just medically, but even if you're a janitor, even if you're, anything at the hospital, they are the largest employer. So when you think about that, it puts people in a horrible position to choose between their livelihood and their ability to feed their own families, and then in a lot of cases being a patient advocate and doing what's right for the patient and for the hospital. So, I'm happy to be the face and the voice for other people who don't feel it's safe for them to do so.
All right. And on that note, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk to Dani a little bit more, because we've just started this, and it sounds like it's a deeper subject than what we all really knew originally. So you're
Correct.
teaching me a lot of information here, and a lot of people need to know this information. And we'll be back in just a minute with more.
Yes, there's more.
Citizen Advocate Dani in just a minute. Don't go away.